Members of the Planning and Development Committee, my name is Dana Benson. Me and my family have lived in Easton, Connecticut, at the edge of Fairfield County for 50 years. I'm a registered Republican and the leader of a local grassroots organization called Save Our Town, Save Our Schools. We oppose Bill 06890 for the following reasons. The live, work, ride concept, we believe, is flawed since we have more market-created alternatives to self-driving than any time in history. Uber, Amazon, Tesla, and remote Zoom working have changed the driving game forever, the way that Federal Express changed the post office. The act is obviously unfair. No matter how social engineers Desegregate Connecticut try to spin it, it penalizes cities and towns who do not opt in by restricting their access to state grants, grants that should be open to all municipalities since we all pay the taxes that fund these grants. You can't call it anything but discrimination. Discrimination is being advocated by Desegregate Connecticut, an anti-discrimination group. I heard Pete Harrison say last year in Westport at a meeting that local zoning is racist and discriminatory and had to be broken and replaced with regional zoning. I would suggest if Mr. Harrison wants to meet the towns halfway, that he stop talking that way. Now let's get into specifics on the bill. We had an environmental attorney spend 15 hours going through it. A flaw that we see in the bill is environmental carve-outs are not adequately defined. No inland wetland carve-out, for example, which is very important. I'm going to read from the lawyer's words. The coordinator would not be able to require that a transit-oriented district, or whatever you call it, include wetlands, which the bill describes as, quote, wetlands as defined in section 22A-29 of the general statutes. But statute 22A-29 defines wetlands as those areas which border on or lie beneath tidal waters, such as, but not limited to, banks, bogs, salt marshes, swamps, meadows, flats, or other lowlands subject to tidal action. Thus, the wetlands carve-out only references tidal wetlands and not inland wetlands. So the bill needs to be corrected there because inland wetlands are extremely important for water supply. Even if that was corrected, we would still have the problem that there's no requirement for an upland review that is critical to protecting inland waterways themselves. So that also would need to be added. In terms of drinking water, the carve-out in there about drinking water is inadequate. The bill exempts from the district, or whatever we call it, TOD, quote, from the bill, quote, areas necessary for the protection of drinking water supplies, and, quote, land subject to conservation or preservation restrictions as defined in section 47-42A of the general statutes. That's 47-42A of the general statutes. But if you look at statute 47-42A, it only applies to land protected by a conservation easement or a similar instrument. Most of, for example, Easton is a watershed town, one of the 14 in Connecticut. Most of our open space lands would be subject to development under this because they're either under private ownership or they're owned by the water company, but designated as class three watershed land, which would be subject to development. So this is a problem that needs to be looked at. And I'm going to go back to another part where I was going to start, but I'm going to go there anyway. This bill would increase the density in Fairfield County, which is already the densest section of the state. Right now, Black Rock Harbor and Bridgeport is. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I hear you. We have the question for you, Rep. Dubowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Benson, for coming in. I know you say you had an attorney go through it and spent 14 hours going through the bill. My guess is that you were not able to get out 14 hours worth of attorney's research in 3 minutes.
Well, yes.
Have you submitted any written testimony that details the problems that you've found in the bill?
Yes, we put in some, we'll put in some more. You know, it's, anyway, yes, we have submitted some, we will submit all of our concerns, okay?
Okay, I appreciate that. You know, when you clicked out I heard you saying that there were what appear to be textual mistakes, citing to the wrong statutes, et cetera.
Well, not wrong statutes. I'm sorry, but inadequate. Because basically, the way I understand, excuse me, I didn't cut you off. Why don't you continue? I apologize.
That's okay. Go ahead.
But the bill refers to state statutes for protection within these zones, which effectively will become controlled by the state coordinator and the Office of Responsible Growth. Once again, we saw no, we spent a lot of time with an environmental lawyer. We saw no language in the bill which would force any kind of coordination with local authorities. So anyway, the point is then we'd be relying upon these state statutes, and you're missing in inland waterways is a big part of it, and also drinking water supplies. Obviously, drinking water supplies is a big concern in Easton. We are the backbone of the Aquarian water system, which supplies 96% of Bridgeport that's 150,000 people with its water. We're 4 of the 8 reservoirs in that system. We supply 20% of the water in Lower Fairfield County, and we're extremely concerned about higher density on our land, not just because we don't want it in our backyard, but because we are the stewards of Southern Connecticut's water supply. And once that goes, if it ever goes, it hasn't been a problem, but right now you have groundwater problems in Weston, which we've never really had, persistent chemicals there. We do have a current small groundwater problem in Easton. So we're very sensitive to that, and we want the legislature to try to acknowledge that in these one-size-fit-all schemes that are coming down, including the Fair Share Bill, including 830G. And Senator Tony Wong this year did introduce a bill that would have exempted watershed towns, 14 watershed towns, from the appeals process of 830G, which would not exempt us from our need to create affordable housing, but would have exempted us from the onerous problem of going up to Hartford with appeals, et cetera. So I'll stop there.
So a statute, well, you can imagine, in my district, I think the closest one of my towns gets to the sound or to any ocean is probably 15 or 20 miles from any ocean. So simply citing tidal wetlands as opposed to inland wetlands sounds like an error to me. It sounds like they're pointing the wrong statute. But I guess regardless, it's pointing to a statute that's inadequate. So you've put that together, the results of your research, into some written testimony?
Yes. Well, yes.
Okay.
It's pretty expensive. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I look forward to seeing that, and I thank you for coming in.
Okay, if I could just make one other comment. There was some discussion of Groton earlier and the development in Groton. And just to give you an idea of what's going on Groton right now in 4 sentences, a developer is using 830G to propose 26 units, 26 septic systems, and 26 wells on a 9.5-acre parcel next to the reservoir that supplies water to Groton, the U.S. submarine base, General Dynamics, and Pfizer. Local zoning requires 1.5 acres per house. This developer is proposing 1/3 of an acre. Some of the proposed septic systems actually are within 100 feet of wetlands that directly connect to the reservoir. And the point is, this is not safe. And this ties into another part of what many people have said on this call, is that these top-down solutions to the affordable housing problem that are coming down from Connecticut, from Hartford, or being proposed by groups like Desegregate, who are backed by RGA, which is out to break regional zoning, are missing the point that regional zoning in places like Easton is designed to keep Connecticut's water supply safe. And somehow we have to, I'm forming a coalition of watershed towns to try to pressure the legislature as Desegregate and the other groups have pressured for their point of view to keep our water safe. Because, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. It's pretty obvious that once you've got water problems, you've got water problems.
Right. Well, yeah, I certainly understand that. virtually my entire town is a watershed that feeds into the Natchog River, which then feeds into the reservoir down in Willimantic. So, you know, that's all the drinking water for that whole area. And the bill says 15 units per acre. You know, the problem in Groton that you've just raised is only 3 units per acre.
Right. And the other thing I think with the bill, we feel that the decision to opt in being given to the Planning and Zoning Board, that decision, that power, we feel should be amended to be given to the townspeople and should be done via referendum to take such a momentous change in the character of towns. Without in Easton, there are 5 members of a Planning and Zoning Board. That means 3 of them could decide for 7,500 people to change zoning that has kept water clean in Connecticut for over 100 years. That should be a decision of the people. And other towns, maybe Westport and Fairfield and Greenwich have already, maybe they're, you know, maybe their P&Zs are perhaps, number one, separated, right? Maybe there's a planning board and a zoning board. And so maybe the power is more diffuse and also they're more urban. But I think, you know, many of the Connecticut ones, you know, towns, you know, you have this possibility of 3 people or 4 people on a board changing the rural character of a town without the consent of the people. In many towns, the planning and zoning representatives aren't elected, they're appointed. So I think that needs to be adjusted also. So I guess just summarize, we have concerns about the protections for the water, the carve-outs for the environment, and also about the actual mechanism of the decision-making to opt into one of these districts. And of course, we feel it's very unfair to penalize a town like Easton, which really is very limited. We can only build what the land will let us. 90% of the town is watershed. And that's why we have 1 and 3 acre zoning. So we probably won't be able to opt into this. And the idea that we won't be able to get some infrastructure grant to build a sidewalk we might need or something like that seems very, very unfair. We pay the same taxes that everybody else does, but I'll leave it there. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I look forward to your written testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. I have another question. My Representative Baumgartner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for testifying. I did want to clarify, you brought up a community that I do represent and live in. Can you reference that project? I'm completely unfamiliar with what you're referring to.
Yes, well, I've been reaching out to the 14. Okay, so Tony Wong introduced a bill that didn't get out of committee over at the Housing to exempt towns in Connecticut with over 70% watershed, and Ashford, I believe, was one of them. And I've reached out, you know, via social media and to the local political parties over the past 3 weeks, and have gotten very little response. But any help would be greatly appreciated. But the goal would be to raise consciousness of the concentrated nature of Connecticut's water supply and the danger of putting high density housing in there. No problem in our affordable housing plan in Easton. We have it's low density. You know, it's a low density housing plan, and that's what we need. You know, we can't really do what Weston did with a higher density.
My question was specifically regarding Groton. You referenced Groton.
Oh, Groton. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about Ashford. Yeah. Yeah, I can send you everything there is about that. I'm very well versed on it. I also have a water consultant who's an expert witness in the case. It's right now in the Ledyard. It's in Ledyard. The Ledyard Planning and Zoning Commission is currently reviewing, and it looks like they may have to go to court. That's my understanding.
You referenced Groton, specifically a project that is...
No, Ledyard. So Groton's reservoir, Groton's water comes from Ledyard. Part of Groton's waters come from Ledyard. So the project is being constructed in Ledyard.
Yes, and I would note that that same reservoir system in Ledyard, the Ledyard residents also benefit from, as they are also the water customers for that utility company. So it is a regional water service operated by a municipality, but certainly as there is also a Groton reservoir that Ledyard water customers benefit from as well. So With that said, I guess my only question, Groton is a community that is compliant with 830G. Our affordable housing stock is well above the 10% threshold. And I would also argue our community is quite not just racially diverse, but also economically as well.
Well, I'm not arguing about anything. I'm just telling you what they're trying to do in Ledyard, and that it could have an effect on Groton's water supply. So I'm not, that's all I'm talking about.
Thank you so very much for your testimony, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Have a nice day.